Hey everyone, welcome to the Fireside Chat number 20 on Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. I'm Tracy Friedlander, and today Eileen and I talk about the concept of being done. What if winning an orchestra job was the beginning of your career instead of the finish line? How does a career in classical music evolve when you have a job? And what does building a legacy look like as a classical musician? These are just a few of the topics we cover today. Before we begin, a couple of things. Please join the conversation at facebook.com/crushingclassical as well as Crushing Classical on Instagram. If you love our content, it would mean the world to us for you to comment and share it with your classical musician friends and colleagues. Let's get started. Hey Eileen, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Great. So today, I want to talk about where I was in my career right before I started Crushing Classical and kind of the whole point of view I had about my career in general kind of got me to that point, which was that there was an ending point to reach.
So there was like there was a point where you were going to be done.
Exactly. Like when I got a job and I had a position, then I would be done. I would be like set for life.
hmm
And
I think
so,
that's a normal assumption for someone who's going to get a job in classical music.
yeah, I do too. A lot of us study with musicians who have had jobs for really long time, like 40 years or something,
Right.
in the same job. And oftentimes, like my teacher, he loved every minute of every year of that. He just loved it. And so he was my idol. And I just dreamed that that would be it for me, the end all be
And who
all.
are you
And
talking about,
so,
Dale?
yeah, Dale Clevenger.
Yep.
And so I just thought that would be the end all be all to have a job in an orchestra where where that was my title and um and I could be kind of, I don't know, done with the whole rigmarole of auditioning, because when you audition you have this ending point. It's the winning, and they always call it winning too. Every musician knows that when you take an audition you either win or you don't win,
Right. Or you,
and
uh-huh.
or you lose.
I know
Yeah, no
y'all
one
don't
ever
like to
says
say
I
the
lost.
word, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So because of that, I think it's set up with that mentality of there's an ending point. And when people win an audition, you never hear anything about what happens after that. You just hear that they won,
hmm
and then they ride off into the sunset and they would start their job.
there's definitely a right off into the sunset type of, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, just like an experience. I don't know. I think it's that way for the person who wins, and I think it's that way for everybody else who, sees them win.
Yes,
Like
a
they're
hundred
done now.
percent.
Especially if you get into a top five, like a real big, you get into the Met or you get into the New York Phil or you get into Philly or whatever, um, automatically, or even if you get into one of the top, let's say 10 orchestras, I don't know, how they number them, but let's just say, what's considered to be the top 10 orchestras, you know, it, you really just kind of consider, oh, they got what they needed or wanted in their career and they're done now.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
And I think that's
So
part of the pursuit of the paycheck, honestly.
yes, because the paycheck means that you don't have to worry about money anymore.
I love how people think that you don't have to worry about money anymore.
I know, isn't that
The
crazy?
biggest
But like,
nonsense ever, but okay.
but it is the biggest nonsense ever. But this is where I was coming from
Mm-hmm.
back in the day. And that's the other problem I think with deciding when you're 19 what you want, and
Mm-hmm.
then never allowing yourself to think that there might be something else for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about myself. That's how I was. I decided that I wanted to have an orchestra job, and that was what it was going to be. And it had to look a certain way, and it had to have, if it was going to have enough money to make me feel like I never had to worry about money again. These are air quotes. Um,
Air quotes.
um, that it would have to be certain, the top tier orchestras, and then I would just have reached the finish line.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But
But
and in a way, Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, if you think about it, that's really how we were raised. I mean, obviously, millennials are learning something different right now because they're growing up in a much more entrepreneurial startup culture,
Totally.
Facebook, it's just a different culture. There's a very different way of approaching, back if you said you wanted to start a business, like when we were, you know, young bucks, if you were to say, I'm going to start a business or I'm going to start a company or whatever, people would look at you like you were crazy. Like, what's
Mm-hmm.
wrong with you? Because getting a job was where it was at.
Yes.
And so I think part of this whole thing comes from that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Just
It's how we were
it was
raised.
a culture. It's how we were raised. Hmm.
Yeah. And so now it's a little more commonplace to think of yourself as an entrepreneur, but everyone's kind of with one foot in one door and one foot in the other because
Yes.
musicians typically, um, especially classical musicians,
Yep.
they think of themselves as going onto that path. So that's the struggle. The struggle is real.
Hmm.
And so where I was, at the point I was at, I moved to North Carolina to as a runner up to an audition. So I wasn't the winner. I was a loser, but I was the runner up. So I was like Miss America. I was joked about that. I was like Miss America, first runner up.
First runner up.
But so I did that, and actually it sort of kind of felt like a real job because I was getting paid weekly to show up. And then a couple of times through the times that I am still here, but I played full time for about 10 seasons. And two or three of those seasons were full time on a salary. Like they gave me a 1 year position. So I kind of felt like it was my job
Hmm. Yeah.
for a while, but
Sure.
it was never really official. And people made sure they let me know that too
Yeah.
in
I
little
mean,
ways.
musicians have a way of doing that sometimes. They really do.
Yeah.
They have a way of
Um,
reminding you that you're not an official member.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think, and we were talking about this earlier, but I think it's sort of that denial of the truth, which is that every single person in an orchestra is replaceable. So you kind of grip onto your title like, that's who you are, and don't you forget it, because
Hmm.
someday you'll leave and they'll replace you with someone else, and no one will know even,
Hmm.
because you're
Yep.
just in this giant entity called an orchestra,
That's right.
and so, in their little ways, they would things like, I wasn't really ever listed in the program, things like
Right.
that.
Right. Hmm.
So that was kind of hard. And then at a certain point, I just realized my career wasn't growing.
Well, I'm going to respond to that for a minute because
Yes.
believe it or not, I know you felt like your career wasn't growing, but you have to remember that people who are in orchestras, the little dirty secret that nobody wants to admit is that they're not growing either. They
Which
stopped
I
growing
did not
too.
realize.
They stopped growing too. There are many, 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 many symphony musicians who are phoning it in today. I don't think anyone really wants to admit that, but there are lots and lots of them that are phoning it in. They're showing up.
Hmm.
They know the part. They played it 100 times. You know, they're musical to a point, but they basically come in and play the notes and leave. It's not, there's no joy in it for them anymore. There's no creativity in it for them anymore. Nobody wants to admit this, but there are a very large number of musicians. It's a cubicle job.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm just letting you know that because I know you felt like there was a point where your career stopped growing, but I don't want you to forget that despite the fact you didn't have a named position, you're not the only one whose career stopped. Let's be clear.
Yeah, I know, but as someone on this side of the fence, and the grass looked so greener on the other side,
Yeah.
and to use a cliche. So,
Right?
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you don't think about that ever. You
Hmm.
don't think, well, gee, what's going on over there that's the same or not as good as what I have.
Hmm. And what's funny
So,
is you would have felt like that even if you had a named position.
yeah.
Do you get it?
Yeah, I do.
Because you felt like that even when you were playing there full time.
Yeah.
A title wouldn't have made a difference. I mean, you might have been paid a little bit more. That still wouldn't have made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you would have been in the exact spot anyway.
Right.
You would have been there anyway. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. So I think that the message really here is that there is no ending point, and that's what I'm realizing now. And it's hard for me to change that point of view,
Yeah.
having had it for so long.
Yeah.
That's really the thing,
Tracy's always
because
looking for I'm gonna paraphrase and you can correct me when we're gonna be done.
yeah, and I consciously don't think that it's
I
going to be
know,
done.
I
I'm
know,
going
I
to
know.
put my
But I
feet up
mean,
for the
but
next
there's a part of you
20
that's
years.
looking for what the ending point is or when we're gonna be done, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's hard for me because I always know there's something else to do, and sometimes I know there's something else to do that I don't even know what it is.
Right, sure.
So it's so different from practicing, getting your session done, putting the horn in the case and being done,
Right.
or going and playing a concert and then being done.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many being dones in orchestra.
Right, being done, I mean, being done marks the beginning of a, trip in the car to get drinks. You know what I
It
mean?
marks it marks when the nachos go in the oven.
Yeah, exactly. For you, it does. It definitely does. Yeah, I mean, seriously, it marks, the when you're going to get in the car and, drive and have a glass of wine with your buddies or whatever,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of dones in being in an orchestra.
totally.
There's a
Oh
lot
my
of
God,
dones.
it starts from the moment you decide to audition and you see that finish line waving, the flag waving
That's right.
off into the distance, and you got to cross the finish line.
That's right. Yep. And the audition itself is a done moment.
The piece of music is done. It's so linear. Like
Yeah,
we start it, a certain amount of time will go by, and then we'll be done.
done. The excerpt, you start it, and then at some point it will be done. There's just
Yeah,
a
it's
lot
everywhere.
done. And I think, honestly, I think that's why career creation is so difficult for people. That's what we're about here, I know. But I understand why it's so difficult for people, especially classical musicians, because everything for classical musicians is done, is about done, getting to
Mhm.
done.
Yeah.
And there is no done in career creation.
Yeah, I know. And when you say it like that, it doesn't sound terrible. Like it doesn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like not having it done doesn't sound terrible when you say it like that. Not that I just don't think that we think about it consciously, but now I'm seeing it as I'm growing crushing classical because
Yeah.
I'm I'm looking for that and it's not there.
Nope.
And so when you start to build an audience, that's when you will never be done
Yeah.
because you never want to stop. You're never going to say, okay, I'm up to 5,000
I
followers.
have enough
That's
fans now. I'm good.
enough.
Yeah. I have enough followers now. I'm good.
I'm done.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah,
we got 30 people in the audience. We're done. Oh, we got 100 people in the audience. We're done.
right.
You know?
But so many of those things that sound so depressing. God, why would you want to be done with that, you know?
Yeah.
But you just are. And so, and I think there's examples of musicians in orchestras who don't have that thing, you know?
Yeah. Sure.
Like last week when we were talking to Mary on the Fireside chat,
Mm-hmm.
and and she brought up Joseph Conyers, the guy who started the Project 440 in Philadelphia. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think he thinks he's done. Like he started
No.
that,
No.
and so I think just because you have an orchestra job or you want an orchestra job doesn't mean that you have to live like that. And I hope it doesn't. I think that everyone can change this way of thinking for themselves, regardless of if they have a job in an orchestra or
Oh,
not,
I
or a
agree.
job
I agree.
somewhere
Oh,
else
I totally
related to
agree.
music.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah. No, 100% I agree. I think, I think we're speaking about how most people think of it.
definitely. And I'm in the mix of that because this is coming directly from my life,
Yeah.
you
Totally.
know?
Yeah. But I mean, I also, um, and I don't remember how I used to relate. I'm trying to think about how I related to it. I don't know that I ever thought I was done. You know what? I think I always just felt, and I still feel this way. I'm never satisfied. I don't mean that in a bad way or a negative way. I'm just never satisfied. I'm never satisfied with what I've done, what I know, um, where I'm, there for me, there's never an ending point. I'm never satisfied with the amount of work I've done or, the quality of the work I've done. I'm never satisfied ever,
Yeah, and that's a music thing too. That's a musician thing. I'm sure you got that from being a musician. No one ever comes out of their practice room and goes, ah, I got that. Now I'm done figuring
Yeah,
that out,
and
you
yet
know?
I've had moments where I'm like, oh, I did a really good job with that, or that was great, but I'm still not I'm just never satisfied with anything. I'm just never satisfied.
Yeah, I don't think any musician is. And so I think
Ever.
that's the weird thing to have both of those things in the same place. You're never satisfied with your playing. You never think you've arrived once you got to that place you're supposed to get to. There's never satisfaction, but there's always a desire to get there. It's very weird.
It is. It is. Um, I think the difficult thing about career creation is you almost have to you have to be unsatisfied all the time in order to get to whatever's next in your career, to go to the next place. I
Yeah,
think
maybe
there's a
getting
lot of
comfortable
arrivals.
with the what?
There's a lot of arrivals.
Yeah, yeah.
There are arrivals, but you're not done.
Right.
And I think that's what you want to switch to in your mind. There are arrivals, but you're never done.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think if there's any switch to make in your mind, it would be that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
There's a lot of arrivals, but there's never done.
The word arrival sounds so much more positive and filled with what's possible or what their potential could be
Hmm.
if than being done, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's an arrival and
Yeah.
then there's what's next.
I like that.
And I think what most people do, and I see this in the business world a lot, and maybe it's also true in the music world, and you can tell me, is I see a lot of people arrive and then I'm going to use your word, relax. And I've done this, um, you arrive, you hit some sort of an arrival point, like maybe, let's say in business, your first goal is you want to earn $10,000 a month. And so the first month you hit 10,000, oh, thank goodness I hit 10,000. And then, in a month, let's say, and then you kind of sit back in your chair. I think I'm going to take a couple days off, kind of thing. That's,
Mm,
and what I learned after being in business for so long is that's the worst time to sit back.
that makes sense.
That's a time to double down. And most people do the opposite. They don't double down. They do the exact opposite. They relax. That is not the time to relax.
Even self-employed people.
Even self-employed people. Actually, that's what I'm talking about here. The self-employed
Okay.
people. People in business. Yep.
That's interesting, but I guess it makes sense because you think, "Oh, I finally made it. I can chill out for a little bit." I guess it's a human condition. Everyone wants to be able to
Chill out.
get to a point where they can relax.
Yeah. And there is no chilling out. I can tell you that the first time you hit a milestone that you were trying to hit, that's a time to double down, not relax and not chill out.
Yeah.
Because it only happened one time. You
Right.
have to repeat it, and you don't repeat it by chilling out. I'm using the $10,000 a month as an example because for a freelancer or for someone this is like if someone is self-employed and they're a freelancer, this is a typical how someone starts. When somebody first begins as a self-employed person, they're usually a freelancer or service provider, or, they're like they're lone. They don't have any staff. They don't have
Hmm.
and
Right.
so the first milestone for somebody in business is $10,000 in a month in 30 days. And the truth is that's the minimum. You don't want to be earning less than that in a month because you have to pay taxes and you also
Hmm.
have to live. And so that's the absolute bare minimum. And I really do mean bare minimum. That's your first milestone in business. And so, but a lot of people, when they get that for the first time, that's what I mean by they chill out or they relax. And what I'm saying is that's the worst thing you can do because you only did it one time.
Right. You don't know if you can repeat it.
Yeah, can you repeat it? And
Yeah.
do you know what it takes to repeat it? Well, everything you did to get to that 10 grand the first time, you have to do that again, and then you got to raise it up a little bit. You're
Right.
trying to get it higher because 10 grand is just that's the floor in business
Mm-hmm.
for a freelancer. That's the
That
floor.
makes sense.
So, yeah, and so that's why I'm talking about arrivals versus done because I really would love for people to think of things more as an arrival
Yeah,
because you can
because
have
when
lots of
you
those.
arrive, like it's like when you arrive in an airport,
Yeah,
you're not you've arrived and you're going somewhere else.
right. You have some other destination.
Yeah.
So you want to have a destination that, how do I say, you really you really want to have a destination that pulls you forward all the time.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
So
So,
much bigger than an arrival, you know? There's several arrivals to get to that destination, but it's really got to be so big that you almost can't reach it.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So think about if someone's goal is to get into an orchestra, that can't be where they're done. That needs to be an arrival point
Yeah.
that goes on to something more.
Yeah, that's an arrival. I think getting an orchestra job is an arrival for sure, and definitely one to be very proud of
Hmm.
because it's not easy to get in. But I think it's the beginning of a career, not the end of it.
Yeah,
It's the beginning of a career. So you can use that platform for something.
that makes
You
sense.
can use that
Wow.
community for something. You know, you can now you've got, let's say that somebody won I don't know, position in, North Carolina Symphony. That's the beginning of a career.
Hmm.
That's the beginning of it. So, okay, so now you're in North Carolina. I'm just making this up. Let's say you're not from North Carolina, just like you moved there and you don't know any, so now you're going to create a community there. Okay, so now that you're there and you're a player and you play in the North Carolina Symphony, what can you now do with that position to forward something important in the community? With maybe with kids and education and music. I don't know. I'm making this up. Maybe with oh, I don't know, music therapy in with Alzheimer's patients. I'm making this up. That comes out of the conversation we had with Mary Javian
Hmm.
and the work they're doing. Um, what, in other words, what are you going to use? I think an orchestral position is a platform for something, and I think people use it as like a destination. I think that's a mistake. I think it's the opposite of that.
Wow, this is this is causing a brain explosion for me.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
That's how I think of
Never
it.
never thought of it like that in a million years.
Hmm.
And it makes so much sense. And you're right, like when people get into these positions, oftentimes it does afford them other awesome opportunities like getting onto a faculty somewhere or something like that and gives them more opportunities to
Yeah,
for playing and teaching and stuff. But you're saying you can create that yourself. You don't have to wait for somebody to say, "Hey, do you want to be on a faculty?" Because we have to be honest about that. There's only so many faculty positions
sure.
around, and if you're one of a bunch of new, I mean, you're a new violinist in a violin section, and you're new, there's probably no faculty spots for you somewhere. So you do have to come up with some other thing. And there are so many things, those are great socially conscious things that you came up with, as far as the Alzheimer's thing and dealing with aging. I loved that topic came up with Mary.
Yeah.
And also there's just any number of collaboration
Yeah,
things
I
that
was
you
I
can
was gonna
do with.
say that you could totally do collaborations. You could decide to start up, your own version of, I'm making this up, Pink Martini. You could decide to come up with I know we did a hot seat with Isaiah and we suggested the whole create a saxophone thing, saxophone group like pentatonics kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, you could create your own ensemble and who knows I mean, I realize that if you're in an orchestra like North Carolina Symphony, you've got gigs you have to play, right?
Yeah.
You've got services that you have to play. But the truth is, you can create around that. You can, it's all in, what do you want to accomplish? What's your ultimate, what do you want to leave here? What legacy do you want to leave here? I promise you that the only legacy that you leave behind is not just going to be that you played in XYZ orchestra.
Because again, replaceable.
You're totally replaceable. Absolutely. I
Once you
mean,
leave, no one's going to remember who you are.
if I think you said this earlier, your husband is a associate concertmaster. Let's say he won a job in another orchestra. Let's just, I know he's not doing that, but let's say he was. What would happen? Well, he would leave and he would get replaced. That's how that works
Hmm.
in an orchestra.
Yeah.
You know,
Any position that gets
vacant,
vacant or that
vacated gets filled.
yeah.
And I think that I think that's for me what I want, why this whole idea of a unique career is important, because I don't have any problem with somebody getting into an orchestra, but that is not a destination. That is one arrival of so many more that are in store for you. If you're someone who wants to leave a legacy, if you're someone who wants to create beyond, and I assume that you are because you're human.
Let's talk about that idea of legacy for a little bit.
Okay.
Because I don't think people necessarily think about that.
Well,
Just I
yeah,
never did.
I get it. And I'll tell you what, I didn't think about it until my mom died last year. I really wasn't thinking about it until last year, because my dad died when I was 12. My mom died last year, 2016. And that was when I started to get very concerned about, because it's very interesting what happens when both of the people who brought you in the world are no longer here. It makes death very real for you. Is
Mm.
the only way I can describe it. I suppose that's not true for everybody, but I think it's probably true for a lot of people that, there's sort of a you're next, not to be all creepy on you, but you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
And of course, your parents are both alive still.
Hmm.
And someday you and I'll have this conversation when they're not, and you'll go, Eileen, I totally get what you're saying. It's
Yeah.
just, it's very, it's a very interesting thing that happens. And so, when my mom died, the first thing, it wasn't right away, but within a few months, I was like, I'm 42 and I'm going to be 43. Like, I'm going to be 43 this year in a month. And um, I started to be concerned very much about what am I leaving behind?
Hmm.
What am I leaving behind? Because, and I think, really when it became real for me was when we were looking through photos, and we found thousands of photos. And so I would say a good half of the photos, I didn't know anyone in the photos. They were old, like they were from when my grandmother was a little girl, kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
Like really, black and white, really, like you can barely make out the face kind of thing because the photography wasn't that good then,
Yeah.
that kind of, photos. And I was like, and I remember looking at these photos, and I looked at all these faces and I said, I wonder who remembers these people. I wonder
Right.
if anyone remembers who these people are. And does anybody remember what they did? Does anybody does anybody know anyone's name in here? And it's not about fame, by the way. That's not where I'm going with this. It's about, what are you leaving behind that is worthy of your life? That's what
Hmm.
legacy is to me. And that's when I genuinely got concerned about it. And I mean, I got really dark about it, if I'm going to be honest. This was like late last year, I would say. I was getting really dark about it because it was really bothering me that I did not feel that I had done what I came here to do. And that's what I think legacy have you done what you came here to do? And so you can define it however you want to define it. That's what legacy means to me.
Do you know what? I think that that was what was bothering me without even knowing that that's what it was. Back when I
Okay.
started to feel really
Hmm.
really down about my career. And it was before we were in touch again. And
Okay.
I was just feeling like, wow, um, I don't want to get back on the audition circuit
Hmm.
and I don't want to work more here. I'm
Hmm.
stuck.
Yeah. Like,
And I
what's next
don't,
for me? Like, what's next
yeah.
for, that whole what's next question is very perplexing for a human being. It's hard.
Hmm.
And I was in that too. I was in that same spot when you and I got reconnected again. I was completing on a certain, I was completing on mostly most of my consulting at the time and in business arena. And I really wasn't sure what was next for me. I just knew that I wasn't going back to that. Just like you knew you weren't going to go back on the audition circuit.
Hmm.
Same thing.
I even tried it. I even made myself wrong for
I tried it too.
not really.
Yep. I tried to get back on it because it's what I know and it's what I've done
Yeah.
and it didn't work. It just didn't work. It was like a broken it was like a bicycle that was super old with a broken pedal, and I was like, but I'm gonna ride it, man. I'm gonna ride it. I know I can ride it, but the pedal's broken. Like I'm going nowhere.
I know.
That's what it was, you know?
Yeah.
And actually the transition into crushing classical, and I mean, this has not been a smooth transition for me at all. And I know it hasn't necessarily been smooth for you either. And so I think part of the message here for everyone who's listening is this is not, like, it's not all fun and games when you are trying to, uh, do your legacy work or find your legacy work. Um, it is not all joy
Yeah.
and it's not all fun. There's a lot of work and trial and error in it, and there's a lot of figuring it out,
Yeah.
you know?
I'll tell you what it's better than. It's better than going to an audition, like actually getting to the point where I'm in the city that I'm referring to the audition I took in January of 2016 before we started talking. And
I totally didn't realize that you had taken one in January.
yeah, for lyric opera. And it was
Oh, you told me about that. Okay. I didn't
yeah.
realize it was in January of 20. Okay. I thought for some reason I thought it was before, maybe the year before.
Nope, it was right then and
Yeah, you got to tell that
the
story. It's such a great story.
yeah, because the what I was about to say is that it's all the work and all the unknowns and all the, highs and lows, all the lows of the highs and lows, because I do enjoy the highs, even though it seems like they're few and far between. But then when they are, it's like this is what we're doing the right thing.
Hmm.
But all of that is so much more worth it than getting to an audition and going, oh my God, what am I doing?
Hmm.
I knew I didn't want to do this, yet I'm making myself do it.
So
And
you
like,
were, so you were definitely making yourself do it.
yeah. Well, first of all, I went back to Chicago in January. I mean, if you're going to get convinced not to move to Chicago anytime at all, it's to go there in
Yeah,
January.
or February, which is the worst.
February is probably worse,
March is pretty
but
awful too.
it was the wind chill was like minus 20.
Forget it, man.
And like the night before the audition, I was staying with my sister in Evanston, and the audition, of course, was in the Loop. And the night before, it's ice storming,
Oh, wow.
like fully ice storming. And so there was like a thick coat of ice on my car, on my rental car. That was when my brother-in-law went to scrape off my car for me, and the handle broke off of the passenger side. He tried to open the car and the door handle.
No way.
Yeah. I'm like, it's cold when.
Oh, wow. That's something.
Yeah. So so but of course it's Chicago. So they've managed to melt all the ice on the roads by 8 a.m.,
Sure,
which
because
who
they're
knows
really
how
they're
they
really good at that. You got to give them that.
I will give them that. I mean, I didn't remember how good it was,
They
how
really
good
are
they
good at
are.
that. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
masters at melting ice.
Because here I am, like, from my 10 years of North Carolina going, I don't think I'm going to be able to get down there. And they're like, you kidding? I'll be fine by 7:30.
100%. Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
Chicago, man. They know how to clear those roads. I'll tell you what.
Yeah. It's
Always
not a
impressed.
thing.
Always impressed.
I know, 100%. So I went down there and it was freezing. And I found, I'm like, I hadn't driven to the loop in a while. And it was a Sunday morning and it was dead in the loop. Like everyone who's from Chicago knows there's nothing going to be open. And
Nothing. Zero.
yeah, on a
Not
Sunday
even a coffee
morning.
shop is going to be open.
No,
Nope.
not even Starbucks
Nope.
at like 8 a.m.
Nope.
So, and I was early because I didn't want to be late. So I was early, like really early.
Tracy likes to get everywhere 2 hours ahead.
Well, it freaks me out.
I
The
know.
idea,
I know.
the idea of having that heart attack when I'm stuck in traffic and I'm almost late,
Yeah.
that's like I can't handle it. So, I was there at like 8:30 and I thought, "Oh, I can get street parking." Well, little do I know that street parking now costs $25 an hour.
Easily. Yep.
Yeah, so I was like, I'm not dealing with feeding a meter. So I went into a parking lot that also cost $25 an hour or $25 a day or something way cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only place to go, I went to see if I could check in, but they hadn't even opened the building yet. So I had to go to the metro station and sit in the cafeteria area and wait.
There, yeah.
Yeah, and it was warm there, so it was worth it. But
At what point
and
did
then
you realize you didn't want to take it?
I think um on the drive there, or definitely when I was parking, I was like, what do I do? When I was walking from the parking lot and nothing was open and I was freezing, I was like, do I want to, I was thinking, if I win this, I'm going to be doing this very thing, but it'll be at night and it'll be this cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You
it'd be
know?
like 6 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And after the show, when it's midnight and I'm going to be walking to my car or the train station or whatever.
Yep.
So I was thinking through like what happens after that crossing the finish line thing. And I wasn't even, and so I wasn't even sure I wanted to do that. So then I checked in, and it's funny because when you don't want to go to an audition, then all the things that you don't like about auditions seem to be like put in front of your face,
Mm-hmm. I get
So,
that. Yeah, totally.
so that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, and I think you did that a lot, though. You ended up taking auditions where, at some point during the audition, you were like, I don't even know if I want to live here.
Oh
I don't really
God.
like it here, or whatever, right?
Yeah, that happened to me when I went to Houston. No offense to Houston people.
Yeah.
Um, I just, I was like, wow, I've never even been to Houston.
Mm-hmm.
I like that was literally the first time I'd ever been there. And I was like, I don't know if I'd want to live here. Like that
Yeah.
just occurred to me.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a great place to live and lots of people like it. But it was like I think at that time I was married, but I didn't have Violet yet. But I was really loving Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
And so then going to Houston and realizing, oh wait, now this was like one of the first auditions that I'd done after being in Raleigh. And I did well. I advanced in the first round and I was like, oh, this, it gets real when you advance. You're like, oh, this
Sure.
could happen.
Sure.
And so I advanced and then I started thinking like, I mean, kind of late to think of this, but this is when I was thinking about it.
Right.
I was eating Chipotle lunch and I was like, wait a second. If I win this, we're both moving here. It's not just me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And
And question, I mean, did you guys talk about that? Would he have moved?
yeah, I think so.
Really?
He would, yeah, because I don't know, it's sort of like one of these unwritten rules when you get together with somebody.
Yeah, but he already had a job.
Yeah, and it would have been the same, it would have just been the same pay. Like I would have made the same as he makes here, so it would just be like we would just be switching places. He would then be unemployed and I would have a job. It was dumb to think about like because I was working in North Carolina Symphony, so we both had work.
Right. So, I mean, that's why I think it's a little bit weird that it was just assumed that you would move to Houston because he had a good job already. So why would he just leave that job so you could get?
Yeah, I don't know. And you know what? A lot of times too, you just take auditions and then you see if you actually win. Sometimes if you try to plan your life based on if you win, that seems like something you shouldn't do either because, oh, well, what if I don't win? There's always that what if I don't win part.
I see. So did you guys not really talk about, because this is interesting, did you guys not really talk about it? Well, what if I win? Are we moving to Houston? Did you guys just not really talk about it?
No, not really back then. Now, if Devin says something like, I want to take this job or this audition or that audition, I go, I don't want to live there. I really don't want to live there.
I see.
Okay.
Now
that I'm older and there's more there's more at stake, There's my daughter and there's
Yeah,
your school and there's just different things.
right,
Also, we like it here.
right.
So it's just it's a weird thing.
Yeah, I could see that. That's interesting. Yeah. So I'm sure there were lots of auditions you took that you discovered either after the fact or during that. That has to be discouraging though. If you're taking an audition and then you go there and then like Houston, for example, you ended up not really liking the city. How well are you going to do at an audition if you've already decided you don't want to live there?
Well, I think I foiled my second round because of that. My head wasn't in it anymore after that.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
the first round was, and I think a lot of times it's just about you know, musicians make, and I'm speaking about myself here, but I think this is the case for a lot of people. You make it that it's about that winning thing
Mm-hmm.
and that achievement of winning an audition. So you don't think past the audition. You don't think what I would do. What
Mm-hmm.
would I do if that happened? Would that make sense for my family if you're in a situation where you're married or you have a partner or something?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you don't think past that.
Yeah.
You just think this is an unwritten rule that all musicians need to constantly be looking for a better job or something better for their career and without regards to what kind of life you want.
Yeah. Which is exactly why we're talking about all this on Crushing Classical because I really do want people to have a choice. And
Yeah.
I think I want everybody to know that you do have a choice.
Oh,
You know what
absolutely.
your
I
life is going
know.
to be or what it's going to turn out to be.
Yeah.
You
It's
know.
been really eye-opening for me to be having these conversations with you on here because for the longest time I didn't even see anything wrong with it. I just did it. It was just like a thing I did.
Hmm.
It wasn't conscious, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely
And
getting that. Definitely getting it wasn't necessarily conscious.
right. And one of the things that we had talked about on a much earlier fireside chat was the idea of being strategic. And that I think goes directly into, or this, what I'm talking about goes directly under that category because
Hmm.
instead of throwing out a giant net and seeing what gets pulled back,
Hmm.
you just get a very specific target and
Yeah.
you go for it all in. And I never did that. I just would open up the paper and go, that pays well. I'd do that. I'd do that, or that's a good position. And you just pick a few, like kind of randomly.
Yeah. I get that. Well, I'll tell you what I'll say to you and to anyone on here. And I'm even saying it for myself, even though I already have a sense of what mine is. I want you to think about what your destination is. I know there's going to be a lot of arrivals, but when I say your destination, what at this point, what I really mean is your legacy. What legacy
Mm,
are you going to leave? Um,
yeah.
and remember that a legacy is often very broad, and you can define it however you want to define it. I don't think there can be tangibles in it, there can be intangibles in it, but I think it would be, if you created a legacy, you can call it a destination. If you created a legacy, while you're still here before you leave, what would you want it to be? And maybe you can or cannot answer that right now, but I think it's a really good thing to think about because then you can create arrivals along the way and then you understand that you're not done,
Yes.
you know, and you're not looking for that done thing
Yeah.
being done all the time.
I think this is why I like the idea of mission statements,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
not that I've written one for myself yet, but just like when I've read them on other people's, especially when ensembles that have been founded by musicians doing something unique. When I read that mission, I go, that's cool. And it doesn't mean it has to stay like that forever either. It can certainly evolve and change, and
Yeah.
that's what's cool about it is that you can proclaim that you have something you're working towards to leave behind.
Yeah. Totally. Maybe it's, you know, it could be a predominant conversation that's left behind. So right now, the conversation for, I'm just using this as an example because you could have a legacy for, your legacy could be a lot of different things. It doesn't just have to be for classical. It could be for, you know, kids, your life, your relationship, be a lot of things. But,
Mm-hmm.
like for classical, maybe it could be, I'm making this up as an example, but it could be something like the predominant conversation in among classical musicians is creating unique careers. Like that's the first option. It's no longer an assumption that I'm going to go from high school into my undergraduate to my graduate, and then I'm going to go audition for jobs. Because that's sort of what it is right now.
Yeah,
Maybe it's now the predominant conversation is now career creation. It's an assumption now that that you are going to create something new in classical music like that.
yeah,
Like in other words, you make that conversation the predominant conversation. So
definitely.
by the time you leave, that's how it is, quote unquote.
Absolutely.
That's just an example of what it could be. Um, because the hardest thing to change is the existing conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
like right now, for example, I'll use Amazon as an example because such a big company. Amazon is let's just say it's arguably the biggest influence. I mean, if you think about it, everybody has to offer free shipping because Amazon.
Yeah.
I mean, really, everybody has to offer it, and they have to have low thresholds for shipping because of Amazon.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have Prime. Not everybody, but a lot of people have Prime. And the truth is, even if you don't have Prime, you can get it in 5 days free shipping.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on with Amazon Prime, you can get it in 2 days free shipping. But if you don't have Amazon Prime, you can get it in 5 days free shipping.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll get it sooner than that. But because of Amazon, my point is that because of Amazon, free shipping is the predominant conversation.
Oh,
So
totally.
if you're a store or online business or whatever that's offering stuff and you're charging for shipping, people don't want to pay it. And they go, well, I don't have to shop there. I'll shop on Amazon or I'll shop somewhere that's got free shipping because they can't.
Mm-hmm.
Because Amazon made that the way that it is.
That's a great example.
Right? I mean, there was a
Yeah.
time when that wasn't true.
Right.
You had to pay for shipping for everything. Do you remember that? I
Yeah.
mean, and it was so long ago that I don't even remember.
Even on Amazon, I remember that you
Even
had
on
to pay
Amazon, yeah,
shipping.
you have
It
to pay
was it was always cheaper on Amazon to pay
for
the shipping, but you had to pay it.
but you still have to pay it. So,
Yeah.
but it's so funny because now free shipping is just, it's how it is now. It's not even, people don't even notice it as a new conversation. It just is. It is a present day phenomenon that it's just normal.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by changing the conversation. There was a time when we used to use, a company called Blockbuster, and all the 30 and 40-year-olds remember it, but anybody before that's going to be like, "What the hell is Blockbuster?" Well, it was a video store, and that's where we got rented all of our videos. Well, then Netflix came in and took over, and now nobody knows who Blockbuster is because they went out of business. Because now, and of course now they're streaming. You could stream on Netflix now.
Yeah.
I mean, cable used to be all the rage, and now all of a sudden, cable is dying. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
totally.
Conversations go in and out. And that's what, part of what's really cool about a legacy is what you're really leaving is a conversation that wouldn't have existed unless you were there. That's
Mm-hmm.
really what a legacy is.
That totally makes
Think
sense.
about it. It's not things you leave behind. I mean, I suppose it is like, Johnny Versace. I know they've been talking about him a lot this year because he died 20 years ago this year.
Oh,
And so there's been a lot of, articles and shows and whatnot about Johnny Versace. Well, he left behind an empire. I know his sister runs it now, but he left behind an empire of beautiful clothes. And so is there a legacy where you leave things behind? Yes, of course.
mm-hmm.
But, what's even more exciting is the prospect of leaving, You can leave music behind. You can leave uh, a way of doing business behind. You can leave a conversation behind. There's so many things you can leave behind. And I'm bringing this up because, you said, let's talk about legacy. That's really what legacy is what is your legacy going to be?
Hmm.
And that is your destination. And, and the best part about it is you may never reach it, but the whole thing about your life is that you spend your whole life reaching it and you may never get there. And that's the whole point is the
Because
pursuit.
even if you don't get there, you're still making waves. You're still creating something
You're
as you
still
go.
forwarding. Yeah. You're still forwarding.
Forwarding.
Yeah. I mean, and somebody may take over for you.
Right.
Somebody may see something in your, declared legacy and say, I'm going to take that and I'm going to, like just like Johnny Versace's sister took over his legacy and she's continued the Versace brand. That's what she's
Hmm.
done. She didn't have to do that. She chose to do it.
Hmm.
And she's making iconic clothes still. She's actually very talented.
Yeah.
Nobody knew that until he died. And so I mean, that was probably the biggest surprise. It was that she was equally, if not more talented than her brother. And so that I'm just bringing all this up because that's what, if you want to talk about done, done is when you're in the grave.
Yeah.
It's not until then. And so that's what I invite you and anyone listening to this call is, what's your legacy going to be? The destination that you may never get to, but you can spend your life doing everything you can to get there. And there's arrival points along the way, but you're never done.
Hmm. And it
So
doesn't mean you can't have nachos and a glass of wine from time to time.
yeah, that's an arrival.
Right.
That's an arrival. And then you get back to work.
Right. Exactly.
You get back to work because your work is never done, really.
Right.
So I don't know.
This is so good for me to hear as well as talk about
Hmm.
because the way that you just put it is so great.
Well, like I said, I had a lot of time to think about it after my mom died. That's when I really became concerned about it. It's not even that I wasn't concerned about it before. It's that it became a
Hmm.
foregone conclusion. Like, wow, you know, I, I don't want to be morbid. I'm going to die soon, but there really was a urgency. Wow, I'm going to die soon. Half
Hmm.
half my life is over. And I remember being in my 20s and I felt like the whole world was my oyster, you know? I
Yeah.
felt really young. It's not that I don't feel young now, it's that I know I'm not young anymore.
Hmm.
And my time here is measured.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much time I have left. And that just became that's why legacy became such a thing because I realized I don't know how much time I have left and it's not anywhere near what it used to be. And so you better get your ass to work.
Hmm.
Like put I need to leave something behind that I want to be able to wake up one day and go, if I died today, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Like I am proud of what I accomplished and I would be okay. The problem with someone like me is, if there is such a thing, if I die before I'm done or I feel I'm done, then I'm going to haunt this place. That's the problem. Like that's completely the personality that I have though. I don't and of course I don't know if that's a real thing. I don't know if you can stick around after you die, but my point is if you can, I'm sticking around. If I'm not done, I'm going to stick around. And I really don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
The one who can't seem to let go. you know, the obsessed one, the obsessive one. Um,
Right.
I'm pretty sure Steve Jobs hasn't left. He's got to be around here somewhere. You know, that guy, I don't think that guy felt he was done at all.
Right.
I really don't. I just don't think he felt like he was. I think he felt like he was never done. It's part of what drove him.
Yeah, but he did create a legacy.
He did. He did. He absolutely did. And if I were him, I'd have been like, you know what? I did the best I could do with my time here, and I really do think he did.
Yeah.
But I want to be able to say that.
Right.
I want to be able to say that. It's not enough for me to watch other people say that. I have to be able to say that for myself. So that's what it means to me.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's
So
really
I hope you
awesome.
guys took something from that for yourself, whatever that is,
Yeah.
and I hope you did too, Tracy.
I sure did. Well, I'm thinking about the conversation we're creating right now, and um, I didn't invent creating an alternative career in classical music, that's for sure. But what I want to do is create that conversation that everyone, it's possible for everyone.
It is.
And that's what I love about what we're doing.
Yeah,
So,
whatever it looks like for
yeah,
you.
whatever it looks like for you. And it
Mhm.
doesn't have to mean turning away a job. It just means something that you're building that you can be proud of. And I find so much inspiration in that, just thinking about it.
For sure.
So awesome. Well, I think this was a great chat, Eileen. And we're going to talk about this and all the things that we talk about on the Fireside Chats in our group, Classical Cats, facebook.com/group/crushing classical. So we'll see you there. And please comment and write on our posts on Facebook and Instagram at Crushing Classical both. And also reach out privately. We love to get your messages.
Yep. We love them.
We love them. So thanks a lot. Have a good day. Bye, guys.
Bye.